Hurry, hurry, come, let's go. Time's no longer on our side. Get on board quickly, this ship is going far. Get your loved ones, get your friends, find your place and settle in. We're not staying here, this ship is going far. It's going far, it's going far.
Hello, my friends. Our focus for this week, once more, is love and justice, and how that is executed through the two greatest commandments Jesus gave his followers. I've heard some Christians ask questions like, why do we have to take care of the planet if we know it's all going to get destroyed in the end, and God is going to make a new earth? Or, why should we bother to try to bring about justice on this earth if we know that the justice systems of this world are corrupt and that ultimately God is the only one who can bring about true justice at the end of time? So in other words, why bother with the here and now as Christians? This is a question we'll try to answer throughout this week. But let's start with the basics, the building blocks of Christianity. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. I love the fact that Jesus didn't just say, love God. No, he was very explicit in how we are to love God. Number one, with all your heart. That typically represents a person's emotions, inclinations, desires, or mind. How do we love God with our affections? By asking Christ to control our emotional brain, and that means his love will permeate our emotional reactions. We won't just be driven by emotional impulses, but rather our emotions will be in harmony with the fruit of the Spirit. Number two, with all your strength. Think of where your strength comes from. It's your body, your muscles, right? I like to think that when we love God with all our strength, all our physical movements, behaviors, and actions, and our bodies reflect the love of God in our lives. That means that we are physically intentional about loving God through our physical health and actions. And number three, with all your soul. This word in the Bible is translated as breath, life, or soul. In the New Testament, it is translated as life or lives, clearly referring to this life. In some cases, the word soul simply refers to people, and in other cases, it is used as the equivalent of some personal pronoun. Sometimes the word soul even refers to emotions, natural appetites, the mind, or the heart. Nowhere in the original languages of the Bible is the word soul referring even remotely or implying that it is a conscious entity that is able to survive the death of the body and therefore be immortal. So there should be no confusion that loving God with all of our soul is about our existence here on earth as mortals carrying out his love on this fallen planet with every fiber of our being. Devout Jews would recite the Shema every morning as a mandate that came directly from God, and that's a great way to start the day. But if there's no love in our heart, soul, and strength and mind, obedience to this commandment is pointless. In the same manner, that love has to permeate our interactions with others and thus fulfill the commandment, love your neighbor as yourself. But more on that in the days to come. Yesterday, we looked at the two greatest commandments as a way of reflecting the love and justice of God. And today, we'll look at the two greatest sins, which are inextricably connected to the love and justice of God. Now, this isn't just an opinion of an author. These two sins are a theme throughout the Bible, which God calls out over and over. And they are, number one, the sin of idolatry. In other words, worshiping silver and gold in all their forms and relying more on man-made things rather than God. And number two, the sin of not executing justice, mercy, or compassion on our fellow human beings. In other words, oppressing the vulnerable, the widow, the fatherless, the alien or the poor, the marginalized and weak. You see, social justice is not just part of a liberal, woke agenda that so many Christians just like to dismiss. And I know that social justice issues have been heavily politicized, but that's not a good enough reason to ignore social issues. Social justice is justice in relation to the distribution of wealth, opportunities, and privileges within a society where individuals' rights are recognized and protected. So, for example, everyone's ability to access health services or education, just to name a couple. For Christians, social justice is a command. Not just any command, but part of the two greatest commandments that Jesus himself taught. Love your neighbor as yourself. Love of God cannot be separated from love of others. There's a cartoon going around on the internet where a family is having worship, and little Billy asks his father, "So if the Bible says we should help the poor, welcome the foreigner, respect others," and the little boy continues to name many of the practical manifestations of loving your neighbor as yourself, "why don't we support those issues?" And the father replies, "Oh, Billy, we don't actually practice these things. We only preach them." Obviously, the irony wasn't lost on little Billy. Let's not just be hearers of the word. Let's be doers of the word. Let's not fall into the sin of indifference of what happens to my neighbor, because that goes against a direct command of Jesus. Love your neighbor as yourself. How do we know God loves justice? Micah 6 verse 8 says, "He has shown you, O man, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you but to do justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God?" Now, just as a quick disclaimer, we're not talking about what is required for salvation. This is what the Lord desires of his followers as a people who serve him with their whole heart, not just external behaviors. This verse is not new information that God is expressing. It is basically an expression of the Decalogue, where doing justice and expressing mercy refers to the last 6 commandments, and the first 4 commandments are reflected in walking humbly with our God. In one way or another, these have been the requirements of God since the beginning of time. Perhaps you struggle to know what it means to do justly in your daily walk as a Christian. I mean, after all, we're not all governors or lawyers or judges in the courtroom. So what do? As Christians, doing justly means that we try to create a world where all people have equal opportunity to fully develop the gifts that God has placed within them. Doing justly is leaving no stone unturned to help create a level playing field for everyone, because everyone is a child of God, regardless of their ethnicity, economic status, religion, gender, and anything else. I know that the term for diversity, equity, and inclusion, or DEI, has been heavily politicized recently, but at its core, it is consistent with Micah 6 verse 8. Doing justly on a day-to-day basis means that, for example, if you're in the business of lending money, you won't charge an exorbitant amount of interest, especially if you work with a low-income population. Or it might mean that you'll take in the foster child that has no home to go to. Or maybe it means inviting the single parent with their kids for Thanksgiving instead of only inviting your own family or friends. The Lord also desires we show mercy to others. In other words, goodness, kindness. And last but not least, the Lord desires that we walk humbly with him. Another way of translating humbly is circumspectly, or with caution, carefully. When we choose to walk with God intentionally, his desires become our desires too, and following him becomes second nature to us. I challenge you to take Micah 6 verse 8 and make it your own, and look around you for opportunities to carry it out. Do you believe in creation or evolution? Strange question, you might think. Of course we believe in creation. We're Christians. Well, let me tell you that many times as Christians, we act like evolutionists. Allow me to explain. One of the core beliefs about evolution is survival of the fittest, which basically means that the species or organisms that are the strongest, fastest, and can best adapt to changes in the environment are the ones who will survive and continue reproducing to maintain the species. Now, I've heard Christians, who are usually in a comfortable spot in their life, speak about other people, particularly the marginalized, the weak, or the disadvantaged, as, well, they brought this upon themselves, they should be able to get out of it on their own. Or other things like, I don't see why I have to help anyone since I've worked hard myself to get where I am. And when Christians say these things, they are acting like evolutionists who believe in the survival of the fittest. They believe that everyone creates their own reality and some people bring some things upon themselves, and they should be able to get out of poverty, for example, on their own. But even Jesus said that the poor would always be among you, meaning that there would always be people in vulnerable situations that need help from others. Do you think God can't solve the problem of poverty, injustice, disadvantage, disability in the blink of an eye? Of course he can. But he calls on his followers to establish justice in the meantime. Why? Because it is a natural antidote to selfishness, which ultimately leads to self-destruction. I'd like to share with you one of the central teachings within Judaism, which is called tikkun olam, and is basically any activity that repairs the world or improves it, bringing it closer to the harmonious state for which it was created. All human activities are opportunities to fulfill this mission, and every person can be involved, whether they're a child or an adult, a student, an entrepreneur, an industrialist or artist, a caregiver or salesperson, political activist or environmentalist, or just one of us struggling to keep afloat. Tikkun olam is often associated to acts of social justice and environmental awareness, but it is so much more than that. Tikkun olam can be carried out in our daily lives in small acts of justice or repairing our world. It can be as simple as bringing in your neighbor's trash cans and recycling containers back to their driveway because the wind blew them away and they are disrupting the flow of traffic. You would want your neighbor to do that for you, right? And so your tikkun olam in your world reverberates throughout the rest of the world. If you open your eyes to opportunities for carrying out tikkun olam, you will find many. The prophet Isaiah writes in chapter 1, verse 17, "Learn to do good, seek justice, rebuke the oppressor, defend the fatherless, plead for the widow." And an even more hair-raising message is found in Jeremiah 22. Be careful in filling your pockets at the expense of other people's suffering or other people's lives. You will not end well. You will pay an eternal price for that. God takes justice very seriously, and so should we. I have to tell you that I think I have the best next-door neighbors in the world. We've never had an argument, nor a dispute about anything. Quite the contrary. One time we were away when there was a big snowstorm, and when we got back, they had cleared our entire driveway, and we were able to get inside the house. They are very respectful of our beliefs, they are thoughtful, caring people, and we help each other out all the time. I love our neighbors. It's really easy to love them and to be Christ-like towards them. On the other hand, a few houses down the street, there is a bitter and angry-looking man who never says hello to anyone. In fact, one day, when our dog was just a puppy, she ran out onto the street just when he was walking by, and he got so angry, he started yelling and swearing at us because he didn't like to be surprised by a dog. This neighbor never smiles, and I really doubt he has any friends. In fact, if he was gone tomorrow, I don't think anyone from the neighborhood would miss him. Good riddance, some might say. They are both my neighbors, and God said, "Love your neighbor as yourself." So if we can't love all our neighbors as Christ would want us to, what does that say about us? Matthew 5, verses 46 to 47 reads, "If you love only those who love you, what good is that? Even scoundrels do that much. If you are friendly only to your friends, how are you different from anyone else? Even the heathen do that." Loving the unlovable, or the marginalized, or the weak, or the unpopular person is the hard thing to do. But that's what's required of Christ's followers. Anyone can love a loving person back. What I've discovered is that when a person or a group of people are kept at an arm's length and lumped into a despised category, it's easier to detach and criticize them or hate them, like the Jews towards the Samaritans in Jesus' day. But when we get to know people individually and interact with others at a more personal level, those barriers start to come down. When we hear and relate to each other's stories and suffering, it's easier to love our neighbors as ourselves. Just as the Good Samaritan developed a caring interaction with one Jew, the barriers came down, probably on both sides. So let me finish telling you about my bitter, angry neighbor. I recently found out that he was an undercover cop for many years in the drug unit. And as many servicemen, he has post-traumatic stress disorder. He is a man who suffers probably on a daily basis and who just wants to lead a quiet, peaceful life to get away from all his trauma. So now he went from being a nasty neighbor to, poor guy, he must have had a rough life. How can I show kindness and compassion to him? And that's one way to fight against our prejudices. Get to personally know the individual behind that prejudice and thus fulfill God's command to love our neighbor as ourselves.
Lord, I do thee